Hello, everybody. Welcome to the You Are a Severance podcast with Kali Thomas, my lovely co-host, and myself, Rodnesha Green. We are two Black ladies who are super into weird sci-fi workplace drama slash thriller slash suspenses. And that is what this podcast is all about. We are going to be going episode to episode, recapping the first season and beyond, going and digging in for insights, finding clues, remarking on
anything.
Acting choices, I don't know, whatever comes to mind. But this week, we are going to be taking a look at episode 4 of season 1 entitled The You Are. I leave that pause because, you know, that's the name of this podcast. And
yes.
For anyone who started listening to this podcast before you got through the episodes, you were probably like, what a silly title. That makes zero sense. Why would you choose that?
Yeah.
This is why. But, Kali, I have a question for you before we get into our summary and our scene by scene. There's a book that gets discovered in this episode, and the book is essentially meant to be maybe a self-help, inspirational type of book.
Slash self-help slash memoir. It's like things he's learned on his travels.
Yeah, it is a memoir. It is a self-help. It is a general quotes page from like quotes.com. I don't know. Like it's all of that and more. So anyway, when I thought about it, because this book has a large impact, as we're going to see, on the characters in this show inside of the Severance world. And it just made me think, this is obviously rooted in reality. There are lots of self-help books out there that people have, you know, really found inspiration from, help from, encouragement from. And I just wanted to ask, is there a self-help slash inspirational book that you've read that has moved you in the way that Ricken's book seemed to move a lot of the MDR folks in this episode?
I don't know that I have any as an adult, but I do remember enjoying the Chicken Soup series as a tween teenager. Chicken Soup for the childhood soul, for the teenage soul.
That was a big one.
Young girl soul.
All
there
the
was
souls.
A bunch of different ones, right? There's a whole series with a bunch of different ones. I didn't read all of them, but I remember enjoying those in those years of self-discovery.
That's so funny. I completely forgot about the Chicken Soup series, but those definitely had a run in the 90s, early 2000s, where like that was the hot ticket self-help book or inspirational book or whatever you want to call it. A recent one that I have read that I just loved, and I don't know if it, again, falls under self-help or what have you, but I don't know, it's helpful to me. There's a book out by a woman named Shauna Nyquist, and it's called I Guess I Haven't Learned That Yet. And yeah. And I read it recently and I was just like, oh, I really like this book because it's all about just like ongoing learning. As adults through life, you're learning things, and rather than like getting frustrated with yourself about what you don't know or how you don't have knowledge over a subject, just like embrace the fact that's like, oh, I guess I don't know that yet.
Yeah.
But there's, you know, always time to learn or grow or what have you. There's other tidbits she has in the book as well, but I liked it. It's a very nice read.
Now, that sounds like a book that is actually helpful. And when we get into Ricken's book later, you could argue that maybe, I mean, it's doing something for Mark, but I don't know if it would be helpful to the general population.
I mean, when we look at the contrast between Mark's response to the book versus Milchek and Cobell when they see this book, there's clearly a difference in the reception of it. But I'm sure, and we'll discuss it when we get to that point, I'm sure Ricken would love to know that there is an audience that is, you know, slurping these words down with a spoon, a big old spoon, and they are just loving it. So
absolutely.
Well, yeah, I guess now that we've got that little bit out the way, let's just go ahead and move into our summary for this week's episode.
Yes. So before we get into this summary, we want to make sure that we let you know there is some self-harm depicted in this episode. Most of you have already watched the episode before listening, but we just want to do our due diligence and make sure that listeners are aware. If you are personally triggered by any images or discussion of self-harm, that is going to happen in this episode. And with that out of the way, whoa, this episode is a meaty one.
Wow, so much
has happened. So if you remember episode 3, we leave off in the break room with Helly. So we pick right back up in the midst of Helly in the break room. It's clearly been several hours, and she's continued to repeat this compunction speech, and she is very much broken down, both physically and mentally. She looks exhausted. Milchek makes her do the statement one more time, and then he realizes what time it is and says, okay, we're going to take a break here and we'll continue tomorrow. And then they pick right back up tomorrow. And of course, since it's the severance floor, it feels like no time has passed for Ellie. She continues to beg him to stop, and he shows no mercy. Meanwhile, we see Mark at home still grappling with the remnants of Petey in the form of that cell phone that he's found, and also in the form of the nap that was left for his innie. But one person who seems to be having a great day is Irv. So he gets a visit from Bert G. Bert comes to MDR, and he's got the new totes before they're being released because he knows the totes are so special to Irving. And he also invites him to come visit him in O&D. The rest of MDR can come as a formality. That's the invite is extended to everybody, but he really just wants Irv to come. And then meanwhile, Helly starts to get extremely insistent upon getting her message out to her outie in a way that truly reflects her desperation to leave Lumon. With the help of a paper cutter, she's allowed to make a video message that is promptly responded to by her outie in the same day, the content of which leaves Helly bereft. Then, even more discoveries are made when a mysterious book addressed to Mark appears in an empty conference room. A mysterious guest also turns up at Petey's funeral, and while Mark is given the means to work through his inner turmoil in a wellness session, Helly R. has worked out a plan to send her outie a resignation request that she will never forget.
You guys, this episode,
there's so much.
We're going to get into it, but I just have to say, and I know this is like a rewatch for us, but for some of you listening, it might be first time through, and even this time through, but I just remember the first time through when I watched it, this felt like, oh man, now we're pumping the gas. Like now we're really taking off. I mean, definitely when we get to the in perpetuity episode, I think that's like the turning point of like, okay, we've built up the world. We've shown you guys, some of our cards, but now we're really going to get into the underbelly. But this one had so much in one episode. I kind of forgot how much was happening in this episode. I was like, oh, this happened in this episode? That's wild.
Same. When I was rewatching it, I was like, oh, these things happened together. Okay, got it. It seems like so much packed into one episode.
Do we want to talk about casting this week, who our guest stars and co-stars are coming alongside our series regs?
Yeah. So guest stars that make their reappearance in this episode, we have Petey, played by Yul Vasquez, Mr. Grainer by Michael Kumsty, and Nina, played by Joanne Kelly.
And for co-stars this week, we have a few. A woman named Elizabeth, who's played by Rachel Addington. There's a bartender at the funeral, played by James Augustus Lee. We have Keir Egan, who he's been credited throughout as a co-star, I think. Well, I don't know why. But anyway, I'm sure because his presence is just ever there. They're always referencing him and his voice sometimes.
Right. Sometimes we hear his voice, but sometimes he's just credited even when we don't.
And he's being portrayed by Mark Geller. We have June Kilmer, who is Petey's daughter, played by Cassidy Layton. And then we have Felicia, as our friend Bert pronounces Felicia, not Felicia.
Yes.
And she's being played by Claudia Robinson. Also just wanted to give a nod that I don't know if we mentioned her as a co-star in the In Perpetuity episode.
Right.
I think she got missed. But that was technically her first appearance, was in episode 3. So just going to bring that back around.
With the egg drop.
With the egg drops, yep. So it's written by Carrie Drake, Dan Erickson, and I finally looked it up. Anna Oyong Munch is her name. This is the writer that we've been botching her name for the past 3 episodes. So sorry. And then this episode is directed by Aoife McArdle.
I've never seen the spelling of the first name before, so I was like, huh.
Yeah. I went and looked her stuff up too. She's been in the game for a bit. She's done some short films.
Nice.
I mean, I looked her up because this is a big episode to manage. So I'm like,
oh, yes.
I'm surprised they didn't pass this one off to Ben, but they must have had a lot of faith in her abilities to give her all of this, because it's a lot of heavy stuff. This episode's heavy, y'all. Like,
it is heavy.
It's a lot.
Yeah.
There's some light moments in there as well, but there's just so many dark things that happen in this episode, and I'm just like, wow. Shout out and props to her for bossing up and handling it and doing well. It's a good episode.
It is a great episode.
All right. Well, with that said, let's get into it.
Woo! So we open, like we said, with Helly in the break room at 5:17 p.m. He's like, it's been a long day. They take a break. We see that nobody is left, right? So she's leaving later than she normally leaves, right? Because the assumption, we know they stagger when they leave, but usually Mark or somebody else is still there after she's gone. And then when they resume in the next day, she's like, come on, why do we still have to be doing this? I must have done this 300 times already. And Milchick's like, 259 to be exact. And he's like, girl, you still haven't done it right, so we're still going. Like, I don't really care what you say. We're still doing this.
Oh my gosh. And this is the cold open, y'all. Ugh.
Yeah, right. This is all before the opening credits. But during this, I kept thinking, like, what must this be like psychologically for Milchick to have to be the one to deliver it? There's the tiniest moment of like, I wish you would just do this right so we could be done. And it's right. It's hard to tell if it's empathetic or just because he wants to be done. But
yeah,
I think there's something about being the person to deliver the punishment when you're not the person who is the decider about the punishment. Like, he doesn't choose when they go to the break room. Mr. Grainer and Miss Cobell do that, I think.
Yeah, he's just there to act it out.
He has to be the one to sit there and do whatever is being delivered to the hands, right? Because we discussed that the first time and we're not really sure what's happening to her, but something physically is happening. And he's the one delivering that when she doesn't say the phrase right. And he's monitoring everything to make sure she seems genuine. That's got to be mentally exhausting for him as well as for the person who's on the receiving end.
I love the way he delivers the line where he's just like, I'm afraid you just don't mean that.
Yes.
Like, say it's the same thing over and over. I'm afraid you still don't mean it. Again. And that's all he says. It's not like, oh, I'm sorry. Nope. Also, like, what is the sign that tells you, okay, now they're really sorry? Because I'm looking at Helly, and homegirl is like, eyes are just like bugged out. Her hair is like disheveled. She looks like she ain't had water in several hours. Like, right. She looks a hot mess. And you talked about how they left it that evening, and they come back to it the next day, pick it up like no time has passed. And for her, no time has passed. Right. Gets her right back in there, and I tracked it. She's in there until at least 11 a.m.
The next day.
Yeah.
And we know work starts again sometime in the 8 o'clock hour, though. So, that's at least another 3 hours or so.
That's just wild.
I don't know if we know what time she went in the first day, too.
Yeah, I was wondering that, too, because we didn't get any kind of visual indication. I'm always looking at the time.
Yeah.
Anytime they show the clock, I'm like, ooh, mark it. I don't know why it matters, because in this area, it's like time doesn't really matter, but just for our frame of reference. Yeah, we don't know what time she went into the break room. I assume it was like early afternoon.
Yeah.
I don't think it was close to the end of the day, but I could be wrong. Because it happened, she went into the break room.
Well, they went
after she ran from perpetuity, right?
Right. I mean, episode 3 was a packed episode too. They did a lot of things before they went to the perpetuity wing.
True.
So yeah, it might have been in the afternoon sometime.
Yeah.
I'm not sure, but moral of the story is she was there a long ass time.
Yeah, hours and hours. And I kind of had the same question looking at Milchick. My thought was like, dude, aren't you tired? I'd be tired having to say the same thing over and over and just sit there. It's not like he's like curled up in the chair, leaning, got like one hand on the chin. Yeah. It's just like, I don't think you mean it. Let's keep going. He's not relaxed at all. He is fully upright, stoic. Earphones are on, and he's just looking at whatever readings
and
he's getting from whatever this machine processes it, and then he just says the same thing over and over. I'm like, I'd be tired of this.
He's alert. He's monitoring all of her vital signs. I guess that's what it is. I don't know. It's a lot.
It is a lot.
And, he can't break for water and a snack if she can't.
Right. So y'all are just stuck in this room in the dark with a projector light for hours. Ugh.
Yeah, so again, I'm sure if he was able to choose the punishment himself, he might choose something different. It's a lot on him too, I think. But yeah, so another thing that's happening in this break room is Helly is hearing this like faint voice. We can't really make out what it's saying, but it sounds like a man's voice. It kind of sounds like an angry voice. So that's a weird little detail that I don't think we got when we heard pieces of Petey's break room tape. We didn't hear any like additional background noise.
There were no extraneous noises. So then it makes you wonder, is that an external thing she's hearing? Is that an internal thing she's hearing? Why? Is this a delirium thing where you're just like hearing voices?
Right.
Like, what is that? The other thing that I noticed, and I know we talked about it in another episode, is like when Petey shows his tape.
Yeah, in
episode 2.
Milchek is recording the whole break room sessions,
Hmm.
and he's very guarded about the tape because when they break to go home, he takes that tape out and he puts it in his breast pocket.
Upper breast pocket. Like, you're gonna have to stab me to get this tape.
Get this right, which again makes you wonder, how did Petey get his
So
tape?
I was wondering, like, is that something he started doing since the PD incident?
Ooh, good point.
Yeah, like it seemed like one of those, like, oh, you ain't gonna get me. It's going right up here. So I was like, is
Right.
that something that, like, oh shoot, we messed up the first time and maybe he used to put them in a bag or a box or something that would have been within reach. And now that they know one of them's missing, they're like, tapes go in the breast pocket. And that's that.
I wonder, and this may be a stretch, but I wonder if it's possible for Milchek to have to be on the other side of the break room too. Because if he did mess something up and Petey was able to get his tape because of something Milchek did, what is Milchek's punishment?
Oh, that's a, ooh.
And like, is it something worse than the break room, or is it also the break room? And if it is also the break room, that might be why he likes being on that side of it. You know, if he's like,
Mm.
I know what this feels like. I want to be on in this chair.
Mm. That is a good, yeah. What is the system of punishment for the higher ups? I wonder, because
Yeah.
we so far have not seen how that is managed. We definitely know that there are things that the higher ups are expecting the underlings to do, and there's always this looming threat of like, oh, what happens when the board hears about this and things like that. So
Right.
I do wonder what they do in those instances, if it is a break room or something else. Interesting. So yeah, I guess we'll move on to the next sequence. So at this point, we pick back up with Mark where we left him in the last episode, and he's in the basement. Last thing we saw is him heading upstairs and then hearing a vibration and seeing that Petey's phone is under the sofa where he was sleeping. So Mark rushes over to pick it up. By the time he gets it, the phone call has ended, but he looks and sees that there's like several missed calls from a blocked number. Rather than keep it on his person, he just decides to hide it in a box of camping supplies in the basement and just keeps it moving. After that, we jump to Any Mark, who is hiding out in the bathroom stall looking at this map from Petey. So, like, we've got both sides of Mark dealing with these remnants of Petey. Like, holy crap, I've got this phone and I don't know what this is about. I've got this map and I don't know what that's about. And trying to decide what they want to do with it or do about it. Any Mark has not told anyone that he has the map and is just kind of reviewing it. From that point, we see them kind of discussing. He comes out the bathroom and Irv and Dylan are there. No Helly. As we mentioned, she's still in the break room. It's 11 a.m. The guys are kind of like, oh boy, she's been in there for a long time. Bert's over here like, maybe you should go talk to them and encourage them to release her early. And Dylan's like, he's not going to do that. What are they going to do?
Dylan's like, when did they ever release someone early? He can't do that. Like, what are you talking about, bro?
And he's like, well, maybe if you just speak kindly. I don't know. I just love Irving because he's so optimistic in all the wrong ways. So they're discussing what's going on with Helly. And then we get an unexpected guest to O&D, and it's Bert, who just appears out of nowhere. He said he got directions there from someone named Alice Kay. And that he came to bring early editions of the tote bag.
This tote that we spent so much time discussing in one of the previous episodes because I had never noticed the tote. now he's got
the totes
new
are here.
Totes. They've got them earlier than the rest of the company because he just was thinking about Irv and how much he said he enjoyed the totes.
It's like, I didn't want it to distract you from your work. That's my Christopher Walken.
I have yet to do it because my Christopher Walken is terrible.
You're going to get a few of those from me, and they're probably going to be terrible, but I can't help it. I just hear it, and I have to do it. But yes, he was very concerned about them not being able to do their job, or Irving in particular, because he's worried about these totes. So he just decided, what the hey, I'll just bring them over to MDR and, let you guys have the tote bag so it is not, I don't know, I don't remember what he says, but sorry. So anyway, they have a little moment, and their little like eyes to each other across the room is just too funny. I think Mark kind of picks up on it, like, what's happening?
Right. Yeah, I think Dylan's not quite aware yet.
Anyway, Bert lets Irving know that he has left directions inside the front tote that lead back to O&D in case they want to stop by, and you can come, your MDR compatriots can come as well if they so choose. So he has left directions for them to come see O&D. Of course, none of the other guys seem interested, and literally as soon as Bert leaves, Irving's like, I gotta go see Bert.
Like, it's time for me to go. It'll lift my spirits.
I'll be back at 1. He's like, I'm out. Bye. And then I'm thinking too, because again, we just looked at the clock. It was 11 something. I'm like, back at 1? You're taking 2 hours.
I thought the same thing. I was like, wait a minute. They be trying to make these deadlines to finish doing all their culling stuff that they're supposed to be doing. And these people just be out of their office all the time. 2 hours? That is a long ass break. Or do you tend to stay?
That's a long trip.
2 hours later than you're supposed to? Like, what?
And with them monitoring everything, you wouldn't think somebody would run to O&D and be like, Irving, get back to work. You have been here too long.
Exactly. It seems like something that normally Irving would not do. He would not be about it.
No.
It definitely seems like something punishable with the break room, right? But for Bert,
Irving said, I'm going to risk it all. I am willing to risk it all.
Right. I'm sure Bert just going to MDR in the first place was probably a big no-no too.
True. Bert was smart though. He's like, I'm just gonna drop off these totes in a map and, and I'll catch you guys later. I gotta get back to work. Like Bert's not trying to hang out with MDR and see what they do and all this stuff. He's just like, oh right, well I'll see you guys. So I just thought that was funny how quickly he gets up and he's just like, I'm out. Anyway, Irving leaves. Mark does not really push back. He's just like, all right, okay. And then as soon as that happened, Helly comes back and she's, again, just looking not great. She looks very dazed and out of it. She comes in and says that she read that compunction speech 1,072 times.
And I did the math just because I was curious. That's 813 more times since where we left her. If nearly 300 wasn't enough. It took her that many more times to get it right. Wild.
That also makes me think too, because again, if she did, now that we're on the math, if she did it 259 times, 259 times the previous day in possibly 2-3 hours, she just did it 813 times in the same amount of time, roughly.
Or that means she wasn't there as long the first day as we thought.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe she didn't get there until like 4 o'clock and was just there for a little more than an hour.
Maybe. Because I'm like, oh.
Either way, she would have increased her rate for sure.
Yeah, because that's more than double.
Yeah.
Ooh.
Yeah.
That sounds no bueno. And then once Helly's back in the room, her and Dylan have a little chit chat in the office break room, not to be confused with the break room that breaks your soul. And she's kind of, talking to Dylan and he's just giving her kind of advice on how to beat the system. And the first thing she asks him is, what about that mumbly guy, the voice of the guy? And he's like, you mean the crying baby? And she's like, no, the angry mumbly guy.
Mm-hmm.
What? So people are hearing different things?
Yeah.
And why?
Mm-hmm. I have a theory.
Oh boy, we'll talk about it.
Didn't do it.
And then Dylan says, it's cool, you can trick the machine. And I had to read the quote because it's just too funny. And he says, I like to imagine my Audi's love made with a MILF or two, which is obviously badass, but I do pity the husbands. And that is how he tricks himself into feeling sorry without really being sorry. And I just was like, Dylan is a teenager trapped in an adult's body. Like, what is happening?
Yes, the way Dylan imagines his Audi. I mean, to have his self-confidence, though.
Right?
Bro, like,
that's true.
He just thinks his Audi is getting it. He does muscle competitions. MILFs, like what? Like he's living the life. He thinks
he's out in the streets. Wild. Okay, he was like, for him to trap me in here, he must be living that life. He must be about that life out there. So he's got to have a work person that can take care of the day to day because he's out there getting it.
Yes.
Oh man. Okay, one of the things that I had to address, and this is weird, but as soon as I saw them in the little kitchenette area, it is confirmed there are microwaves in there, and I think other little cooking things. And I'm just like, to cook what is the question? We already discussed in the previous episode how it doesn't seem like they bring lunches in from home.
Yeah.
And yet the only thing we see as far as like food resources is the vending machine. Mm-mm. So the other thing I wanted to bring up had to do with the vending machine snacks, which this is my version of the totes. Like, like I'm like, what's in this vending machine and what's going on? And so far there have only been a few screen grabs of the vending machine. Uh-huh. There are 2 up close ones of the smaller boxes, but what I didn't notice that first time through watching it is that the upper row and the bottom row have larger boxes.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm like, what's in those? And so when I looked at the image that Dylan is in where he's assessing, one of the boxes looks like a slice of pizza. So then that made me think, oh, are those lunch items?
Yeah, that answers the question about the lunch, right?
Like maybe the larger boxes are things that you can have for
Yeah.
lunch.
At first, we were like, are they really just eating like sunflower seeds and peanuts and raisins all day?
Well,
That's
right, because
terrible.
yeah, so when you get the close up of the small boxes, literally, I'll read them to you guys. They have edamame, raisins, peanuts, beets, blueberries, ginseng, sunflower seeds, and what's the last one?
Oh, I
Oh,
can't tell what the last one is because it's a little cut off, but
uh,
got to be something trail mixy. The cubed ginseng is interesting to me.
oh, it's meat. It's supposed to be beef jerky. That's right. It's like dried and cured
Oh,
meat.
yeah, it's a meat. Oh, gross.
So I don't know what's in that top row. I really can't tell if those are maybe drinks or I don't know what those are. The bottom row is the only thing that looks like it might be like meals that you could maybe
Yeah,
heat
because
up and
there's a
eat.
triangle.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely the pizza. Maybe the top is like breakfast foods because those would be the size
Mm,
as like, a McDonald's apple pie or something.
okay, that's
So
true.
maybe
That's true.
maybe it's that. And we now know the use for the microwave, right? Because we're like, they don't have anything they can warm up. Why is there a microwave? But now we know.
Now we know. All right, guys, it's confirmed there might be actual use for the microwave that is there, and I feel a little bit more okay about these people not being devoid of nutrition for 8 hours a day
Right.
every day. So that makes me feel somewhat better, even though clearly their options are still very minimal. But we won't go there.
Great. So I need to backtrack to the beginning of this section a little
Hmm.
bit, back to Mark finding Petey's phone ringing. And I completely understand why he didn't like try to answer it, or you can't call back the block numbers, right? But why didn't he turn it off was what I kept wondering.
That's a good question. I don't know. And I remember the first time through watching and thinking, does this man have like an everlasting battery? Shouldn't it need to be charged at some point?
Right.
Like,
Especially because it's like an old flip phone burner phone.
right. So I'm like, either it has like the battery life of like 400 iPhones, or it has the battery life of like, I don't know, something that burns out very quickly. Like, I don't know which, but I don't see anyone charging that phone ever. Even when Petey was there, it's not like he was like, hey, do you got a charger for my old burner phone? Like, uh,
Right. And for that matter, how was he charging it when he was living in the greenhouse?
good question. Good question. Maybe he went to the local library. You know, they'd be having chargers there. I don't know. I don't know if they have libraries in Kier. So
Right.
that was a good question. I don't know why he wouldn't turn it off, especially if he was concerned about getting calls. And to me, the only thing that makes sense is like, oh, you want to know more. You're just trying to act like you don't
Right.
want to know more. But
Simultaneously want to know more, but also gonna hide this away under a bunch of camping stuff.
mhm,
What?
whatever. So yeah, any other thoughts that you had through this scene?
Yeah, I've got several. First off, just strictly reaction. I always love Dylan's response to O and D. When Bert walks in,
Oh
he
my
jumps
gosh.
up, he immediately grabs the
Grabs a
stapler like he's ready
stapler.
for a battle. It's so hilarious. Like I died rewatching that scene. It made me laugh so
This man responds like he is in the Thunderdome, like he is in the Gladiator Arena.
hard. He's like ready to go at a moment's notice.
Wild.
And then Bert and Irv together just
They're
they just
just
make me smile.
adorable.
He was so happy to him when he walked
As soon as he's like,
in.
but
Oh,
you came to
Bert.
MDR. How kind.
They're cute.
Their little exchanges are because they both have these very unique inflections to their
They do.
voices. And so their conversations are just too funny to me. I'm like, this is adorable. Like, I don't know what to make of it, but it's fun. Yeah, you get that little nice light moment. I feel like in this episode, especially, that's the only lightness you're really getting throughout. So much else is going
Very
on.
true. But then I also definitely wanted to discuss, I think you noted it too, the angry man mumbling voice that Helly hears in the break room
Mm-hmm.
versus the crying baby that Dylan hears. And I won't say my theory out loud because I do think it is a
Mm-hmm.
spoiler, but it is definitely some foreshadowing to maybe
Mm-hmm.
their outies that I definitely missed the first time I watched through. And I will say this, that based on the fact that they are hearing different things, my theory, my little assumption about possibly what Mark hears is I think it must have something to do with his wife when he's in the break room. I'm thinking
Okay.
at this point we know that she had some kind of accident. I think there's a
Mm-hmm.
car accident. So maybe there's like car screeching noises or maybe there's screams or something because it does seem it has to be something that is personal if it's changing per person.
Okay, so moving on, we now follow Irving over to O&D. He's getting there as quick as his feet can carry him in the steps of love. He is making his way downtown through those white halls, and he gets there. So they have a little moment where they're kind of talking about the art because that's their thing. They discuss a portrait called The Youthful Convalescence of Kier. What are these portrait
the
names?
actual F's. Yeah. I mean, right. It makes sense for what's depicted, right? It's very obviously here is sick in the bed as a child, and there's a bunch of people around him. But like, why are these names so ridiculous?
Don't know. I want to know who's naming the art. Or was it Kier? Did Kier decide this will be the youthful convalescence of me? Like, I don't know. Yeah, so Bert tells Irving all about how, the art gets cycled through all the departments and then goes back to O&D, which means every art piece they have, every department is going to see it at some point,
Yeah.
which is interesting to me. So I'm like, whether it fits the aesthetic or not, I guess the aesthetic is Kier, so it will always match.
Right. Yeah.
And then shows Irving the coveted piece because Irving basically talks about how the time he saw it, it was a brief moment and he cried. And this clearly is a piece that means a lot to him for whatever reason.
Yeah.
And so then Bert pulls it out. So they have that little moment. They're sharing that. Irving eventually heads back to MDR, and as he does, he passes an empty room and sees a book in a chair and gets very nervous looking, and then he goes out the door and is looking around to see if anybody's there, and then just kind of pops back in. We go back to MDR, and he's trying to get these moments where he can look at the map some more.
Yeah.
Mark's not very smooth, but I mean, so far he hasn't gotten caught, but I'm just like, homie, you're not even like concealing very well. Like, come on.
Right.
So he's trying to sneak a peek, and then Helly shows up. And so Helly's all like, I got to 4%, which she seems very just ambivalent about. And Mark's just like, that's great. Dodgy eye, dodgy eye. And like, Helly's looking at him like, what's up with you? You're acting stranger than normal. And she kind of just side eyes him and then sits down and just lets it go. Mm-hmm. And then Helly pops back up again and finds Mark's map because Mark is not as smooth as he thinks he is. Like, and they start reading Mark the Riot Act about how he has this, contraband, and Dylan's like, you're supposed to turn these in, and did you make this? And he's like, nope, it was Petey's. And then they go back and forth. Helly calls him a hypocrite. What I get. Rightfully so. And then the scene ends. Oh, this was rough. Helly and Mark get into it, and we'll touch back on that. But they go back and forth, and Mark gets so incensed by the way that Helly's prodding him that he just goes straight to the printer machine, which has a compartment at the bottom, pulls out the paper shredder, shreds the map, just like without a thought, and just looks at her like, and what? And she looks like she wants to punch him in the face.
Right.
But Helly also makes a mental note about seeing that because she didn't realize that there were more like supplies and things under there.
Yeah.
So what I don't know what you thought about this moment or this scene.
Well, I mean, in the lead up to that, right, Helly is just like, you were supposed to be Petey's friend and he's clearly left this for you and you aren't going to try to figure it out. Like, what the heck? And I agree with her. I was like, Mark, this reaction seems very out of character for your innie. Like, I understand you're trying to be good at your new job, but like, you were showing so much concern for Petey and why he left, and now you found what might be a clue as to why he's gone, and you're gonna what? Because you got called out, you got called a bootlicker. Helly told him to go lick a boot.
She straight up said, "Go lick a boot, Mark," and I about died. I was like, I've never heard someone insult someone in that way.
Right? And so you're going to get rid of this? Why? You clearly wanted to figure out. And I think Dylan is watching this exchange between them feeling the same way I'm feeling because he really seems confused by Mark's newfound allegiance to all things Egan Handbook and like trying to be best department chief. He kind of looks like, wait, you aren't curious about this map? Why aren't you trying to figure this out?
Right.
Like, he wants to know. Dylan wants to know. Helly wants to know. Like, let's figure this out together. Let's just keep it from Irv.
Right.
Irv is the one who normally would be like, you got to turn this in. So yeah, this is a very weird moment for Mark.
I mean, I do think to some degree it is just pride of him being called out.
Yeah.
And him feeling like it's a personal attack against him as a supervisor. But then I also wonder, like, maybe he's thinking Petey's already disappeared.
Yeah.
We don't know what happened to him, and he was the last one playing with this map. And it's one thing for me to play with my livelihood or whatever, but if we're all in on this, who knows how this is going to affect all of us. And I just saw you come out of that break room looking broke down.
Yeah.
I'm not taking any chances. We're shutting it down. Like, I don't know if that was part of it as well. It's like, no, just shut it down. Forget it. Done.
Right. But you wrote down a quote from Helly in this moment too. I don't know if you want to read it or should I?
Yes. So when they were going back and forth and Mark was basically trying to grandstand her with this whole like, things were so much better before you got here. And this is where he lost some points, because this is where he tried to get high and mighty and was like, before you got here, things were just calm and cool. We did our day to day. We did our work, which is mysterious and important. And we dealt with things as a family. And that's how Kier wanted it. And that's what we're supposed to be. And Helly looks straight at Mark with the most even-keeled face. And she says, I could not, with a razor to my throat, be less interested in being your family. Your best friend left this for you, and you don't give a shit.
Oof.
I was just like, ooh, gut punch. And I feel like it was that moment where Mark was just like, oh, we're not family?
Fine.
Oh, okay. Boom.
Shred this paper.
Well, it's one of those moments that, again, it cuts on all levels, because she's over here saying, like, listen, all your attempts to get me to, quote, be your family, forget it. I will never be your family. I don't want to be your family. And also, clearly, being your family isn't all that great, because this is how you're treating the person that you called family before me.
Right.
And you're just acting like him being gone doesn't matter, and you're just trying to brush it aside. So why would I want to be your family? If I go missing in 2 days, you're just going to act like I didn't exist either?
Yeah.
So I'm like, yeah, that's a personal attack. That is a personal attack. And he responds in kind. So that map is gone. Can I tell you, the first time through when I watched this and I saw him share that map, I had an audible reaction. I was like, no!
No!
Like,
Well, don't do that. Yeah, same.
because I'm like, no, this. How are you gonna know what's going on? You can't shred that map. Why would you do that?
Like, he doesn't know the background to the map. He doesn't know how important the map is. Oh no!
I was upset, and I'm over here thinking like, there's got to be another copy somewhere. And Petey must have left another one. Like, he must know about another one. Maybe he made a copy. Like, I'm over here trying to figure out how that map still exists somehow.
Yeah, and I was just thinking, like, it doesn't matter how well you know someone, you can't anticipate how they're going to react to something, right? So Petey successfully predicted that Mark would be interested in this map, but he could not have predicted all the variables that Helly brings, right?
Yep.
Like, because this was purely a reaction to Helly, this shredding the map.
Yeah, 100%. Oh, at the beginning of the scene, sorry, I forgot. Before Irv left to come back to MDR, the reason why he left. So him and Bert are talking more about the painting. They're looking at it, gazing upon it, just like so enamored by it. And Bert's like, you know what? I done brought you to my place. You know, I showed you all my cool art. Like, I done pulled a Kier quote here and there. Like, you know, we're feeling good. And then he reaches over to grab that hand. And Irving at first was just kind of like,
oh, okay. Yeah.
Are we touching?
Right.
And then quickly, his response, so quickly, he was like, I have to go. And he just takes off.
Oh, good. He's like, oh, I have to go now, bye.
I was like, oh, Irving, you're so awkward. You're so delightfully awkward. He's like, I have to go. No response, no reason, just turns and leaves. And that's it. That's the end of it.
Oh, it's so good.
But clearly he's not upset, because as he's going down the hall, you see him just kind of like in his daze and reflecting back on it and smiling. So it's like, clearly this was one of those like, you know, oh my goodness, like the boy I like just held my hand and I just didn't know what to do. And and so that's what brings him to the book that he finds. But I just had to make mention of that moment because his reaction was just so extreme.
Right.
Poor Bert's thinking that he did something wrong. He's like, I went too far. I pushed it.
Push my luck. Poor Bert.
One of the other things that came up during the argument when they're looking at the map, and Helly and Dylan are trying to like figure out what it could be and what is this, and Dylan's like, oh yeah, these are all the places we know of. I wonder how long it took him to make it. And then Helly's like, these are houses. Mm-hmm. Maybe he found a secret tunnel out to houses that are nearby, or a way to get out of the building or something like that. And ever since that map has popped up, I have been very curious about the houses on the map. That's definitely been something that I've been trying to figure out, like, is this indicating just the surrounding neighborhood near Lumon? Maybe there's other houses like the Kier house that exist on the Lumon floor. Because I'm like, if they made space to build this house for Kier, do they have houses for all the Egans, like replica houses?
I don't know.
Or is it residences of other kinds? Like maybe, I mean, we know Cobell doesn't live there, but do any of the managerial staff live there? Does Grainer, does Milchek?
Right.
Or are there severed people that live there?
Right. Or is it just another very specific department on the severed floor that has something to do
Mm.
with houses? Because there's houses, but
Mm.
then there's question marks by the houses too. Like
That's true.
still trying to figure out what it was.
Hmm.
So I'm wondering, like, okay, he's mapped out the departments that he does know about, but then there are areas that are not filled, like he was exploring the floor and trying to add more to it.
Hmm.
And we do get, just wait, guys, we get a glimpse of another department soon, not in this episode,
No.
but so I'm wondering, like, oh, maybe these houses aren't depicting something that's detached from the severed floor. Maybe they're actually on the severed floor too, whether it's an actual house or it has something to do with housing, or they're keeping something there, or I don't know. I
Hmm.
didn't think about the replica house, right? Because that is in perpetuity wing. It's on their floor as well. I don't know. There's just so many questions in such a little doodle.
I can't remember if we already discussed it, and if we didn't, I'll just cut this part. But didn't Petey mention to Mark that there are people who don't leave, like never leave?
Oh, oh, we're gonna have to go back. I don't know.
I feel like that was something that Petey said. Like, there's people that are there that don't leave, and Mark was kind of like, "What do you mean? Like, none of the innies leave?" And he was like, "No, they don't physically go away from the building."
I don't know.
We'll talk about it more, but I just had a bunch of questions about the houses on the map, and
I
I was
did
just
not.
like,
Oh man, I had just had so many revelations just now. I had not
"You're
thought
like,
about
I'm
these
making a note."
houses. That's wild. That's wild. I can't wait till we get
Yeah.
to go back to that
Yeah, I know. Oh, you guys, it just gets better and better. I think that's all I had to say
for
about
this
this sequence.
section.
What about you?
Yeah, I think so. So we can move on.
All right.
So Irv, after he was on his way back and he saw this book in the conference room, abandoned in the conference room, which we know from the previous episode that it was left there by Milchek. He was going through the book when the alarm sounded to go chase Helly down. So he's like, oh shit, and he
Mm-hmm.
left it in the ran. So Irv, being the good employee that he is, he goes and gets Mark, and Dylan is nosy, so Dylan tags along. And he gets Mark and brings him back to the book, and he's like, I thought about going straight to Milchek, but I didn't want to like skip the chain of command. And Mark assures him, like, I'm just gonna return it. He opens up the book and he sees that there's a note addressed to him from Ricken.
And then everybody freaks out. They're like, "It's got your name in
Like,
it."
is this a sign from someone? Did Petey leave another thing? Dylan mentions, like, is this another Petey thing? Irv doesn't know what he's talking about because Irv has no idea about the map exchange that's just happened. Is this a test? And Marcus heard that.
Irv's over here like it's a test, like the spicy candy, which I was like, "What was that?" But
What was the spicy candy? He does say that. But yeah, Mark quotes Kier, as they all love to do, be content in my words and dally not in the scholastic pursuits of lesser men. So he's like, no, it's contraband. I'm gonna turn it in. And Irv's like, good job, Mark. So back while this is happening, Helly is alone in MDR and she looks at the printer cabinet. And when she did this, I thought she was going to go try to get the shreds of the map out. But she actually goes and gets a paper cutter. And then she leaves with this paper cutter. And she busts into Miss Cobell's office. And she's got her arm across the board of the paper cutter and her other hand's holding the lever, like, I'm gonna cut myself. I'm willing to do it. And
mm-hmm.
she's like, give me a camera. I'm making a video for my Audi. And Miss Cobell is like, we can work this out. And she's like, do I look like I'm fucking joking? Like, I will do this.
Patricia is like, no, no, you do not. Like, she just is so like, oh.
Yes, no. Like, wow, what a headache this woman is being. Like, she just put a whole wrench in my day. Now I have to deal with this. She's like,
Right?
okay, fine, Mr. Milchek, go fetch the camera. Like, what?
She seems so like these dumb innies just always trying to like she seems so just
right?
put
It's
off.
just another sign that Helly is not as original as she thinks she is, right? Like, she's like, oh my God, you wouldn't believe the things you innies have tried. And I wish you would just like get past this already. But so they let her make her video, and she does not take her arm out from under that paper cutter lever until he presses the record button.
Sure
She's
does
like,
not.
I'm serious. So I'm making this video. And
She's
then
like,
she's like,
try
okay.
it, try it, and these fingers are gone.
And so she makes another video. We don't get to see what's in the video, but she makes another resignation request. And then the entire MDR group, Cobell and Milchek, along with them, they lead her to the elevators. She leaves with her DVD and she says to Mark, well, boss, I guess this is the part where I should tell you to go to hell, except you're already here. I was never sorry. She directs that at Milchek. And then so sad because she enters the elevator. Then, of course, the elevator doors just open right back up. And Annie Helly is back. The entire MDR team is still just standing there looking at her. And she's
in the exact positions. Like, did they just stand there and wait for her to record this? Who was downstairs to tell Audi Helly, like, okay, listen, your Annie got real wild. She made this video. You might want to watch it. But you're probably going to need to send a response. Like, if nothing else, at least Cobell had to leave, I would think, right?
Yeah, at least Cobell had to leave.
But did she tell everybody, stay right here? Nobody move. Like, I'm just trying to figure out the choreography
I'm sure she
here.
did, though, right? And they were probably standing there frightened out of their minds. Like, what's going to happen if we move? Yeah, and so Helly, like, the elevator changes. She looks down. She notices that the color of the DVD she's holding has changes, and the door opens, and everyone's standing there. And it's a response from her Audi, which she very clearly filmed just then, the same day. She's in the same clothes. Everybody else is still there in the same clothes. And the DVD is crushing. So Audi Helly says this: I understand that you're unhappy with the life that you've been given, but eventually we all have to accept reality. So here it is. I am a person, you are not. I make the decisions, you do not. And if you ever do anything to my fingers, know that I will keep you alive long enough to horribly regret that. Your resignation request is denied. It's crazy. And like before she does this little spiel, she's like, I thought I made this clear when I denied your first resignation request, but here we are again.
But I guess not.
Clear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whoa. First of all, Helly is a badass. I think the paper cutter it was actually a good idea. I think it had legs, you know?
Homegirl is smart. Listen, she stays ready. She pays attention. She is not missing a trick.
Yeah.
Eyes are wide open.
Yeah, she's like, Stockholm Syndrome is not going to get me. Oh, no, it's not. Like, I'm going to stay fighting to get out of here.
Right.
But then the other thing, this scene was just so heartbreaking for Annie Helly. But I also was just like so dumbfounded by the lack of empathy that the Audi Helly has for herself. Right. And something about me, listeners, is I love a crime drama. I love a crime doc. I love in-depth about a sociopath. I love it. I love it all. I eat it all up. I watch Name Anything. I've watched it. I love a true crime doc turn to drama to watch.
Loves a true crime.
Back and forth between them and see the differences. Right. So, lack of empathy comes up a lot in those things. Right. And it makes me wonder what is going on with Audi Helly, that like it's one thing to lack empathy for other people, but even sociopaths have empathy for themselves. Like, this is still you.
That's true.
This is still you, and she's willing to cut off her fingers to get out of this place. And you're like, I don't give an F. You're not going to be here. Not only that, but you're going to threaten me. I'm going to threaten you with the torture of having to live with that you've mutilated yourself. What? Like, that blows me away.
Here's what's wild to me, and this is what I thought of in that moment, when she says that last part of the quote where she's like, and if you ever do anything to my fingers, know that I will keep you alive long enough to horribly regret that. But all I could think was, but aren't you going to suffer whatever it is? Like, whatever punishment's going to happen to her, you're going to feel it to some degree too. So it's all self-inflicted harm. Like, I don't understand how you can punish her without punishing yourself to some degree.
Exactly, which again brings me back to like the lack of empathy for yourself. Like, as much as you said, like, oh, you're not a person, you're not real, you don't make the decisions, but she is, because she's still you. So like, what are you talking? No. This is actually still physically you. What she does to herself, it happens to you, and vice versa. So yeah.
That's wild.
We still have no answers about Audi Helly, and this just brings up even more questions for me, that response.
I had the same. I was just like, I don't get it. I don't get why she's being so dogmatic about not letting this woman go. And again, it's all just like self-inflicted to some degree, even just on a subconscious level. And I couldn't think of a reason that made sense to me why Helly would be willing to let her suffer, any Helly continue to suffer, and not think twice about it. I'm like, do you have a gun to your head? Is somebody like, you will work for Lumon? Like, are you being tortured in some way on the outside that you don't have a problem torturing yourself on the inside? And then the other thing too is like, she's watching this video in front of everyone. It's
Yes.
not like she got a private room to watch it, or even just Cobell and Milchick. Like, everyone's watching it. And when they show everyone's faces, like when they showed the MDR team, I feel like they were just thinking, what would my Annie say to me?
Right.
Like, I feel like they've all had some form of an experience with getting resignation requests denied, because I think all of them probably have,
Yeah.
because they've all tried to get out, at least within the first couple weeks. But like Mark was saying, like, if you keep coming back, it's because your outie chose to be here.
Yeah.
So it's just like, we're all just kind of stuck here. And this is the worst thing you could hear, for your outie to basically say, you don't matter.
Right.
And I don't care what you're going through. I feel like all of them kind of took it to heart a little bit, of just like, dang, like, whew, I feel that on some level.
Yeah, what's interesting to me, and I think it speaks to, like you said, they probably have all gotten some form of resignation request denial, but they seem to have a lack of reaction more so than a big reaction, right? They're all kind of watching. None of them seem shocked to hear her say these horrible things to herself. So I
Mm.
gotta imagine that when their requests have been denied, they haven't been nice either.
Yeah. And that's if any of them got a video request. We
Right.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
This seems like a pretty rare instance, or at
It
least
does.
to have it happen the same day is a rare instance. But
Right.
I don't know if even getting a video request at all happens very much to anyone else.
Yeah, and again, I think it also speaks to, is Helly important in some way, right? Because her first denial came back faster than normal. They were like,
Mm-hmm.
"Oh, why was this?" Mark was made a point to be like, "They usually don't come back this fast. What happened?" But then also, it makes me think back to the first episode where you mentioned Mark says, like, every time you find yourself back here, it's because you've chosen. He said, because you have chosen to come back,
Mm-hmm.
not your outie,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because he's, stressing the point that you are still you on the outside. You are still one person. So you chose to be back here if you're here. But this response is like, she's very much speaking to her like she is a different person.
Mm-hmm.
Like, no, 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 no. You don't get to make a single decision. This is not me making a decision with somehow being subconsciously aware of what's going on inside and still making a whole person decision. I make the decisions. You deal with the aftermath of it, and that is what it is. This is your lot in life. Deal with it. I don't want to hear anything else from you. It's terrible.
It was harsh. I think the first time through, I don't remember if I cried, but I think I had to like pause, because it was just like, that is intense on multiple levels.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, the fact that we are technically one person, but you are speaking to me like I am a sub person and a separate person.
Not only that, not a person, right?
Yeah.
You are not a person. I am a person. You are not.
Mm-hmm.
Wild.
That was hard. But guys, it isn't all doom and gloom. In the next sequence of things, we see Mark. He's talking to his sister. They are planning Devon's birth giving. And apparently, Devon wants to give birth at a birthing cabin. So Mark's looking through the details of that, which I'm just like, what rich white people stuff is this? Like a birthing cabin? What? So they're discussing that. I noticed that the site, when he was looking at it, either the place or the city where the birthing cabins are, it said Demona.
Oh, I didn't.
Which I was like, I don't
know.
I noted that. I don't know if it'll matter. Don't know what it means, but I feel like it always does. Like, anytime they make a visual reference to something and they linger on it, I'm like, write it down, because
this means something.
It might mean something later. And then right after he gets off the phone with Devon, he gets an alert on his phone that shows a news article about Petey. And it confirms that he did die, that he was a former severed Lumon employee, that he died of an unknown ailment. And so that is how Mark gets the news. And I don't remember if it mentioned the funeral in the article or funeral details.
I think we just see the headline, but I'm sure it must have.
Because I'm trying to figure out how Mark even knew where to go for the funeral.
Right.
But yeah, so that confirms that Petey did not survive his collapse. R.I.P. Petey. Then we go back to Lumon. So that was a nice little reprieve, sort of, kind of, because we get some news about that. I said it wasn't all doom and gloom and death, but it was. We get back to Lumon, and we're in Cobell's office, and she's talking to Grainer. They have an interesting dynamic. But Cobell is like, Grainer, we need Petey's chip. That's just gotta happen. Grainer mentions that Petey is being cremated after his funeral, basically like, so you've got X amount of time to do something with a body, because after the funeral, that body is toast. And the funny thing is, like, he mentions it, but then he also seems like, what are you gonna do? What could you possibly do?
I think he mentions it to let her know, like, there's no way we're gonna get it, like, let it go. But Harmony Cobell takes it as a challenge.
She said, oh, aren't we? Can't I? And she sits at that desk and starts reciting those 9 core values.
And this is the
And
first time we get to hear all nine
all
because we've
9,
heard
that's
part
true.
of
So I will recite them for you now. The 9 core values are vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, wiles. She says them almost exactly like that.
Yes.
But
Well done.
and she repeats that wiles one a few times, I think, kind of gassing herself up to be like, all right, we're going to do some extreme measure stuff. So
Yes.
Harmony, get on board, Harmony. We're doing it.
Yeah, speaking of, because she said it so many times, I was like, I know like wiles in the terms of like feminine wiles, right? So I just like, let me confirm this definition.
Come on,
right?
definitions.
So
you know I love it.
um, devious or cunning stratagems employed in manipulating or persuading someone to do what one wants. So yeah, I think she's doing exactly that because she knows she's about to employ some cunning and devious stratagems to get this, yeah, right, to get Petey's chip. So yeah, she's like wiles, wiles.
I feel like each time she says it, it's like a new revelation. Like, wiles, how can I get Petey's chip? Wiles, he isn't going to be cremated for 5 days. Wiles, I'd go after that body in the meantime. Like, it's like each step was like, oh yeah.
It would have been interesting to see if wiles wasn't the 9th value. Like she's reciting the
probity.
Yeah, trying to figure out which one of these is going to help her in her moment of need right now.
That's
and
true.
When she's like, then it's like wiles. Thinking
Wiles
about
is
it.
gonna do it.
Wiles might work. Oh, wiles is gonna work.
I like that take too. You're right, because it's like vision, nah. Verve, wit, cheer, nope. Humility, definitely not. Benevolence, not capable of it. Like, you know, like. So that could be it too. I like how those moments from an acting standpoint where it's all subtext, you know?
Yeah.
Like, we don't know what she's thinking. Either of those two intentions could be imposed upon the text. But I love how actors find those moments. Because, is it like each word is a discovery? What are we discovering? Like, clearly those words mean more than just the words. It's not like she's just like, vision, verve, wit, cheer, humility, benevolence, nimbleness, probity, wiles. Okay, I'm ready. You know, like, and, you know, shout out to Patricia Arquette, who is a vet in this industry and knows what she's doing. So that was a nice little moment. These moments between Cobell and Grainer, the way they talk to each other seems like they've not only known each other for some time, but like they know each other on a more personal level.
Yes.
And I'm just like, what's the history there? Like, I don't think it's like a love interest type of thing, but it just seems like we go way back type of thing.
Right. I noted the same thing a little bit later, but we can talk about it now because you noted it here too. We discussed the names in length in one of the previous episodes too, but Mr. Grainer is the only other person besides Natalie who calls Harmony.
You're right.
So it makes it very confusing what their relationship is because we've pointed out that the underlings are addressed by their first name. And you address anyone above you by Mr. or Ms. So we're like, okay, Natalie is clearly above Miss Cobell. Milchick is not. Obviously, none of MDR or OD are. But where does Mr. Grainer fall? Because Harmony gives him orders. But also, do we know his first name?
I don't think they've said it. They just call him Grainer or Mr. Grainer.
Yeah, so she must not call him by his first name, but he calls her by her first name when it's just the two of them. So like you said, it doesn't necessarily seem like it's romantic, but it does seem like there's some kind of camaraderie where I do believe Cobell is still above him, but she's let a guard down around him, or maybe he's been a person that she's leaned on to get her out of some shit in the past. So that's why he's the only one who can call. But I highly doubt he would call her by her first name in front of other people. I don't think he would.
Oh, no, absolutely not. It seems very much a behind closed doors. And it seems like he says it in moments where he's trying to pull down the like barrier veil. They seem very ride or die, like either he's gotten her out of some stuff or vice versa. They know each other's secrets. They know some backstory on each other. And it seems very, I look out for you, you look out for me. But now that she has this position, it's like, I'm the top dog, so put some respect on my name. Anything else you want to point out?
In this section, when Mark is at home, we get another phone ring too, and I just keep getting stuck on why he hasn't turned off his phone. But we already discussed it. But I was just like, it's not being tracked. I guess it's a burner phone. He can't get tracked. It's another tote bag moment for me. I just keep wondering about this phone. I'm not happy about it. But so we don't.
I wonder how many of these moments we're gonna have between the two of us. It's like tote bags. What's in the vending machine? The phone. Like getting hung up on all the wrong things.
Oh man. Yeah, I think that's it for this section. So we can move on to Petey's funeral, guys. This is wild.
This funeral.
So Mark goes to the funeral. As he's standing looking at the enlarged photo of Petey, who other than Miss Selvig shows up, obviously, aka Cobell. We know that she's there on a mission, right? So he explains that she knew Petey because he used to come by the shop and he adored my hibiscus wraps. Such a lovely man. Yeah. I'm like, what kind of story is this, woman?
I thought that too. I'm like, hibiscus wraps.
Right. And I had a thought because she mentioned something earlier on from her shop to Mark, and I can't remember what it was, but it seems like a weird combination of things that she sells here. But it made me wonder, like, okay, did she make this up just for Mark, or does she have kind of an outie life piece of her that is able to kind of keep an eye on all of them in some different way? Like maybe on the weekend she does work at a shop in Petey's neighborhood. And that brings the question of like, okay, so she lives next door to Mark. She's got this shop. What else is she doing? Is she keeping an eye on anyone else? I don't know. But anyway, she says like, oh, we can be funeral buddies or something, which is odd.
Inappropriate.
Ropes, right? And so Mark's like, I'm going to go grab a drink. They part ways and Mark ends up bumping into Petey's ex-wife. And she realizes when he can't really explain how he knew him that he must be from Lumon. And he's like, oh, so you didn't know him at all.
Ouch.
Yeah, ouch. And he kind of doesn't know what to say, right? Meanwhile, Mrs. Selvig is meeting Petey's daughter because she's gone to go see the casket, which is in a different viewing room from the rest of the funeral, right? And his daughter is in front of his casket and she's asking her a bunch of dumb questions, just kind of really to create small talk, I think to make her uncomfortable so that she leaves the room. I think that's Mrs. Selvig's goal, Cobell's goal. Yeah.
I hope that was her goal. I hope so.
Yeah. And so then we move on to the funeral, and it's a beautiful scene. We'll get into this. I think I love it. I love this scene. It's very weird. So on the one hand, we have in the funeral hall, they're playing a video of Petey and his daughter performing Enter Sandman by Metallica. If you've heard the song, it's like intense. While this is happening, we see Cobell is whipping out her drill.
Just, your everyday drill that you pack in your handbag,
To drill the chip out of Petey's head in the other room. Wild. She successfully gets it, guys. Like I said, challenge accepted to Mr. Grainer earlier. She's like, oh, I'm gonna get it. And then Mark has an exchange with Petey's daughter as well, where she's just like, again, confirming you don't really know him. Mm-hmm. Oh, you're one of those Lumon people. And she says, ever think that maybe the best way to deal with an effed up situation in your life isn't to just shut your brain off half of the time? Which is like, ooh, another jab. And then
Mark's getting all the jabs.
Yeah. And then, after this funeral, he knows he didn't really know Petey, but he is just distraught and makes him go to a dark place. And he drives to a tree in the night. This is after he and Mrs. Selvig have gone home and he decides, no, I can't go inside. And he drives to this tree, which we, assume must have something to do with how his wife died. Yeah. Another heavy scene for episode 4.
Like you said, it is a beautiful scene, but It was also so hard to watch because it's just so messed up. First and foremost, you really got lucky, Cobell, because it's like you had the perfect alignment of all the things in place to be able to do this. Because I'm like, first off, like you said, the casket's in a separate viewing room. Very seldom have I been to funerals where the casket is not dead center in the front of them pews at the end of the aisle in the church hall. Very seldom have I seen it be separate. Now, I've seen people do memorial services and, viewings separate, or memorial services and funerals separate, but they're usually on different days.
Yeah.
But not in the same moment. So I was like, lucky you, the body was in another room.
Well, what I was wondering too, Rodnesha, is this is always a question I have to ask when I see something like this that I've never seen before. Is this a white thing? Is this a black thing? Is it a
Maybe.
black thing to have the casket up front or to do like a viewing separate? Or I know they do, I know white people do repasses differently sometimes. So I was like,
You're
oh,
right.
is it a white people thing?
You
I
might
don't
be
know.
right. Maybe it is a black thing versus a white thing. Because you're right. Maybe they do. Maybe they feel like it's. I'm just speaking on behalf of all white people, but I'm like, maybe they think it's, gauche to have the body in the same area as the service. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe. I don't know.
And versus black people that are like, I gotta see that body.
We
Oh,
have to
like
have our testimony. We have to have a come to Jesus in front of the body. There has to be somebody that
we
falls
gotta
out over
fall
the
over the
casket.
body.
Yes, it's got to be in front,
Mm-hmm.
front and center. Everybody comes up. We watch the family go up first.
Mm-hmm.
Then the service happens. Yeah,
We went on a tangent, but to get us back on track, so that was the first set of events that I was like, okay, lucky for
yeah,
Selvig. And then the other thing is the Metallica music. I'm like, you are so lucky that they're in there
they're
playing this Metallica
blasting it.
piece so loud that they can't hear you in there drilling like you're making houses. I don't understand. Like
Yeah,
drills. You hear a drill, but obviously no one's hearing it because you've got Metallica blasting. And
right,
I'm like,
right.
you lucky.
And can we talk about this song choice though? Because I loved it. If you're not familiar, I mean, I feel like if you're like me and you're a person who doesn't know rock, you still know certain songs, right? And this is one of those songs, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
And on the surface, like directly, it's about the Sandman, that story of the Sandman,
mm-hmm.
at night. But like symbolically, it's like foreshadowing for Petey that he's gonna be chased, right? It's like running around, trying to fight sleep, not being able to sleep because this man is gonna get you off to Neverland.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how Petey ends, not being able to sleep, not being able to get any reprieve because he is on the run. He's being chased. At the end, he can't escape. Like it grabs him, whether it's death that's chasing you or Lumen or both, which like he doesn't escape Lumen because Cobell still gets his chip. Like it's wild.
Even in
I just
death.
thought it was such a great song choice.
I just know every time they got to that chorus, or like the bridge to the chorus, that's just like the sleep with one eye open, holding your pillow tight,
Yeah.
exit light, enter night,
Yeah.
take my hand, we're off to Never Never Land. All I could think was just like, this is Severance. Like, exit light
Yeah.
of like having full awareness of yourself
Mhm.
and full knowledge of everything that happens. And you're like,
Exit light.
right,
I'll do
like,
that to the viewer.
but like, an enter night, meaning there's parts of you that's going to be closed off that you will not ever see again. And like, take my hand, we're off to Never Never Land. It's like, we're about to drag you into this world where you never, ever, ever really can truly escape. Brilliant song choice,
Brilliant.
but also just makes this scene so much creepier. And the dichotomy of them cutting back and forth between this home video
Mhm.
of Petey and his daughter, the contrast of the music they're playing, and then seeing Selvig in this room just digging into this man's brain with a drill and a tweezers.
Yep.
And I'm just like, this is so disturbing for some reason.
Wild.
And then you've got Mark who's like having a full on panic attack in the pews.
Yes.
I'm just like,
Oh yeah,
boy.
that's right. So they don't even stay until the funeral's over, right? Like Mark gets up during this moment, like he's starting to have a panic attack. He can't handle it and
Mm-hmm.
happens to walk out as Miss Cobell is done and is like, "Oh, Mark,
Mm-hmm.
well, I've said my goodbyes. I paid my respects. Let's go." So they exit. Another thing about this funeral, though, too, is the interaction Mark has
Mm-hmm.
with Petey's wife, her reaction, and also later what his daughter
Mm-hmm.
says to Mark, too. It makes me wonder if the family, if they were still together when he got severed and kind of the severance led to the divorce. So, like, maybe they were having problems and his way of dealing with it was doing
Mm-hmm.
severance, and that just made things worse for the outing, maybe. I think at first, my first watch through, I thought they were divorced before it happened, but now I'm thinking maybe they weren't.
Yeah, this was one of my questions as well. Because when the daughter talked about like using severance to deal with an effed up situation, I was like, well, what was Petey's situation? And then, of course, I
Mhm.
thought back to the pilot script we read, and I was like, was this their way of shifting the storyline that was originally for Mark,
Right.
where it was a divorce that had him come undone? I was like, is this supposed to be Petey's thing? Like that he lost his wife and he couldn't deal with it, and so then he did severance? Or is it something else, like you said, that maybe happened before that led to it and then that caused the divorce? Because she knew about Lumen pretty extensively, it
Yeah.
seems.
Yeah, and we also posed that question pretty early on too. Mark is by himself. He's a single man and he did it. But how would one's family react if you chose to be severed, right? So maybe this is the aftermath of that.
Yeah, I felt bad for Mark during those exchanges because everyone just kind of looked at him with such disdain and such like,
Mhm.
just like, ew. And it was just a notch away from get out of here. We don't want your kind here. I was just like, dang, like no one's even going to try to just be like, oh, okay, so you're one of his work guys. Okay, got it. Like, not that you have to be feigning niceties or anything like that, but just like, well, thank you for being here and just leave it at that. But wife's all like, so you didn't know him, is what you're telling me. The way she looks at him is so just full of disgust. And then the daughter is like, oh, you're one of those. And I'm like, dang, these people get so dehumanized. And I'm not saying like Severance is great. I'm not on board. But like the dehumanization that seems to come with the people who have elected Severance is interesting to see in the outside world.
Mhm.
There's very little tolerance for it.
Right. And it just speaks to how desperate these people they have to be in such a
Mm-hmm.
desperate state to choose Severance because they clearly don't have the support of their families. Like, I think Devin at one point says, I'm proud of you to Mark for making a decision to do it because it's what you needed to do for yourself. But I think it's very clear that they don't
Mm-hmm.
like it. Like, she and Ricken don't like it. Phoebe's
Mm-hmm.
family clearly don't like it. Because I don't know about you, but when I make major job decisions,
Mm-hmm.
I'm
Mm-hmm.
consulting multiple people in my life.
Right?
I care what they think. I take their considerations to heart. So for me to be in such a place to be like, you know what? None of y'all really want me to do this, but I'm going to do it anyway. Yeah. I just think they must really have been in dark places.
And for everyone that we've seen have reaction, like I feel like Devin is the only one who has a reaction from a place of compassion.
Yeah.
I guess she's like thinking, I know what Mark went through. I know where he was before this. I have compassion for the choice he made, even though I don't agree with
Right.
it. I get it.
Right.
And I think that's what I keep expecting from people around severed people to be like, I don't get why you did this, but clearly, like you said, you must have been in a desperate situation to choose this. So I have compassion for the fact that you were in a position where you felt like this was your only option, even though I don't personally agree with it. But no, like folks are just like, ew, ew.
Yeah.
And I'm just
Right.
like, dang, man, it's a harsh town. Ooh.
It is.
And so that makes me wonder, what has Severance done to the community at large that has caused it to be seen in such disdain, in such a light,
Yeah, because on the surface, I feel like it shouldn't be a big deal. Like, okay, you're still the same person on the outside. The only difference is if we used to have some conversations about your job, now we're not going to have any, you know? But it has to be something about like what people think about Lumen as a whole, like
Mm-hmm.
what they think about that company and questions about what their loved one's innie is doing there.
Yeah. Anyway, so the first time through watching this episode, I'm thinking the funeral is going to be like the heaviest thing we deal with.
Yeah.
I'm thinking like, okay, we've already seen Helly like use a paper cutter in ways I never thought I'd see. Like in the way that you always fear a paper cutter is going to happen to you.
Right. She was about to do that on purpose.
Intentionally, right? And I'm like, whoa, okay, that was intense. Then we get to this funeral scene and I'm like, good grief, that was intense. And then I'm thinking, okay, that's it, right? Right? Anyway, we move on to the next sequence. We don't get there quite yet, but Cobell is triumphant. She goes back in, talks to Milchick, tells him that they got the chip, she got the chip. And she also tells him that she wants to arrange a wellness session for Mark.
For Mark, yeah.
And Milchick seems to kind of question it. He's kind of like, okay, well, why? And she's like, just trust me, he needs it. And I feel like anytime the wellness stuff comes into play, Milchick is just kind of like, okay. And again, I don't know if this is going back to like, I'd rather they come see me in the break room so I can flex on these hoes. But like, I don't know if it's that or if there's something else to why he's kind of apprehensive about the wellness center. I don't know. But anyway, so they set that up for Mark. Irving and Bert have another kind of run in. Bert's still like, oh, I messed things up. And if I made a fool of myself and I embarrassed myself. And Irving's like, are you embarrassed? Why are you embarrassed? And he's like, well, and he's like, I'm not embarrassed. I'm good. And then he's like, oh, we're good. Oh, okay. So then they go around, they do some more art displays and putting up pieces. And Irv starts to confess to Bert about his, sleeping on the job, nodding off the visions and stuff that he's having. I don't know if he gets as much into the vision so much as just him falling asleep at work.
He's like, I'm not supposed to be sleeping at work.
Yeah. And Bert/Christopher Walken's response is, you're a party guy, disco king. And I'm just like, what?
Like, I wish I could take a nap. Like, you're out.
Right? He's like, I feel like I sleep for 12 hours out there.
Right? He's just gassing him up like, you needed to take a nap is a good thing. It just says like it speaks volumes about what you're doing outside. Like I'm jealous of you.
Right?
It's so cute.
He's
I
like, oh,
love
I
it.
chose a winner. You out there having a life, doing
It's so
things.
king.
Oh man. So then they talk a little more about Kier, their favorite subject.
Yeah.
And basically this is another point where Irving kind of Bert puts Irving on to the fact that there's more to Kier and the handbook and all the stuff than maybe Irving thinks.
Yeah.
And essentially Bert is just like, he speaks to us like in other ways. It's not just through the handbook and the paintings. And Irving's like, what do you mean? And then he says this quote that says, the original word of Kier, I shall whisper to ye dutiful through the ages, and your noblest thoughts and epiphanies shall be my voice. You are my mouth, and through ye I will whisper on when I am 10 centuries demised. So basically, I guess him telling Irving, like, Kier will find a way to speak his will and his, desire to us, not, just through the handbook, but through other means.
Yeah.
After that happens, we go back to Mark reading Ricken's book, and it immediately just cuts to an excerpt page from Ricken's book, and the chapter is titled The Quitting Bell. It is chapter 9 of the book, so I don't know if that means that Mark has read 8 whole chapters up to this point.
Right.
Or if he's just skipping around, just kind of catching what he can when he can. I don't know. I don't have the whole quote because it is... No, yes, I do. Just kidding.
Yes, you do. It's there.
Okay. This is the quote that it starts with that says, you think you need your job, but I've lived abroad as a vagrant, abstaining from my own money to rely on the charity of strangers. Most were beggars themselves, yet they were happy. And so for that summer was I. Your job needs you, not the other way around. So...
Mark's wheels are turning. He's like,
boy.
I've never had
Mark's
this
like,
thought.
my job needs
Right.
me.
Never would have thought to have this thought. Never would have had this thought myself organically. My job needs me?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
What? What? How? How could this be?
Yeah, the wheels are definitely turning for Mark. And then we go back to Irving and Bert, and they depart for now. They head in different directions back to their departments. And these are the only things that I had in this little section. When Bert talks about them hearing from Kier and that he will find other ways, not just the handbook and the paintings, the immediate thing I thought to myself was, the chip in your brain.
Right, just implanting thought.
He's speaking to you through the chip in your brain.
Yeah.
Like your thoughts will be my thoughts because I'm feeding them to your brain directly through a chip. Your epiphanies shall be my voice. Like basically all the things inside this world that you think are organic thoughts, no, they're mine.
Yep.
Any accolades you get, they're my accolades. So that was more the thing that I thought, like, oh, this isn't just like inspiration, like heavenly voices from above. It's like, no, these are voices inside your brain from a man who recorded them on a chip to control you so that you are all basically doing what he thinks is the thing to do and the way to live and all that stuff. And so I was just like, oh boy. I don't know if he means that there might be other ways or other clues that are being left around, but that was the first thing I thought was the chip. It's the severance chip. That's how he's finding other ways. He found a more direct way.
Agreed.
Now, what's interesting, though, is with the handbooks and the paintings, there seems to be some contrast in how those things are received because the handbook has been through several editions, the compliance handbook. And we already know that there's clearly a version that Irving has seen and a version that Bert has seen that are not necessarily the same.
Yeah, I think he even tells him that here, Irving is like, I haven't heard that one. And he's like, oh, I subscribe to an older version.
It also seems like, for me, it seems like the older versions of whatever these Kier things are, memoirs or thoughts or what have you, were more about how to live a total optimal life. And it seems like you said, over time, things have been whittled away to make you the optimal work person.
Yeah.
So it's less about whole life living and more about how to be a good employee.
Yeah.
Which that might be all the things that are absent, because a lot of the things that Bert brings up to Irving are about living a life. Like when they talk about the Imogen painting, and he basically puts him onto the fact that he met his wife at work.
Yes.
But now the stuff that they're seeing in the compliance manuals are like, don't seek out love relationships at work. There is another portrait that Bert and Irving are going to explore that gives another insight into Kier and how work influenced his life, the health of his life, through something that happened at work versus just work for the sake of work. And it seems like now a lot of the compliance is just focused on work and how to be a good employee and how to be an optimal, productive worker.
Right.
Versus what the original intent may have just been, work can be fruitful, to live a more fruitful life, or who knows what, you know, like
Yeah.
all that to say, I agree with you. I think over time, whatever the compliance manuals are now, it's just because even if you look at it, I think when we saw that scene when Mark was dusting them, I think the original compliance manual was that thick one at the bottom, and then they get smaller and smaller and smaller as you get up towards the top.
Right.
So it's like, oh, we're just going to trim the fat, trim the fat, trim the fat. This is all you need to know.
Well, or are those like additions, like encyclopedia things, like they work on each other? Because I think
Might be.
it wouldn't make sense for them to leave access to the first one if they're trimming to make it better.
True. That's true. Could be that.
Yeah, I wonder.
Could be that as well. Let's move on. We're almost there, guys. This is that last intense moment. Do you want to take it?
Sure. Okay, so Mark goes to have his wellness session. He meets up with Miss Casey. We see in the wellness center, there is now that red and green candle in the office that
Sure is.
Selvig slash Mrs. Cobell stole from Mark's basement. Miss Casey gives him a ball of clay. So this is our first realization that, oh, not all the wellness sessions are the same. She gives him a ball of clay and says, sometimes I find that it helps when people sculpt what they feel. Would you like to do that? Mark's like, okay, sure. So meanwhile, Helly and Dylan are still working in MDR. Helly tells him, I'm going to head out. She looks like she's holding something as she leaves, but you can't really tell what she has in her hand. Dylan's like, yeah, I'm going to stay and finish up this thing. I think I almost get it right. But what he really wants to do is go to Mark's desk. So as he goes to Mark's desk to snoop around, Helly grabs a trash can. So Dylan is going to Mark's desk. He finds that Mark, in fact, did not turn in Ricken's book, The UUR. And he's like, I knew it. I knew he was going to keep it. And in this moment, we're kind of cutting back and forth between these goings on and seeing what Mark is like fervently sculpting in his wellness session. So Irving, while this is going on, is also heading back to O&D. And while he's there, he kind of hears this odd humming noise, and he discovers a small room that he peeks into, and he discovers that O&D is not as small as they have been previously led to believe, right? What we know of O&D is that there's only two people, Bert and Felicia. But there's more people, right? Meanwhile, again, another beautiful scene because we're cutting between Helly. Helly is on the move towards the elevator with this thing in her hand and the trash can. Mark is sculpting away at this tree. Bert is walking back now from O&D as he's trying to ponder why. Irving, yes. Oh man, I did the same thing you did. Irving is walking back trying to figure out why Bert could have possibly lied to him about how many people are there. And Dylan is reading a book. He just opens up to a random chapter. Chapter 5 is an acrostic poem called Destiny, which, by the way, acrostic poem is so Ricken. Oh, it's so Ricken. But this lovely, copious note taker, Rodnesha, has the poem here. So I'm going to read it to you.
Please do.
Dreaming the start of it all. E is for energy, breaking down walls. S is for stewardship of home and earth. T is for terror, which gives us more worth. I is for eyes, which observe us with love until N, meaning newness, rains down from above. And why? That's a question we needn't now ponder. For destiny, friends shall deliver all yonder. So Ricken clearly doesn't know how acrostic poems work because eyes does not start. And he straight up say, you know what, guys? I can't think of anything for why. So we're gonna move on past why, because I can't think of anything.
That is a question, isn't it? Like it took everything in me not to just open mouth laugh while you were reading that because it's just so silly.
Yeah, it's so silly. And Dylan's reading of it is very much just a straight toned, like you can't tell how he's reacting to it. He's just reading it, right? So we cut back to Mark and we see that he has made a tree out of clay, which we'll revisit. And we see that Cobell is watching on the monitors his wellness session and like kind of reacting to the fact that he's made a tree. And then it ends with, again, trigger warning, Helly has brought a extension cord into the elevator and she stands on that trash can that she brought and she tries to hang herself. And the scene ends with those elevator doors closing
closing.
on her, attempting to hang herself.
When it ends too and it closes, it is silent. There's no post-credit music. There's no sound effects. It's just like you hear the doors ding and just blackness. The first time I saw this, I screamed. I was like, is she dead? Is she dead? I thought for sure they killed off a character in episode 4, 5. What are we on? Four.
Yeah, I remember the first time I watched it, I just sat there stunned. They did that right, not having a post-credit music.
Yeah.
They let me just sit in my silence.
Yeah.
I was like, I don't know what to think.
And then the other part too that got me is that before she does it, they cut back to an early scene that we don't see any other time in the episode. It's only in that moment. They cut back to a moment where she's at her desk and Mark peers over and he's basically, how are you doing? And she's just smiling like, oh, I'm good. I'm fine. He's like, it's getting easier. Yeah. She's like, sure is. And just smiling in his face, knowing full and well, I'm about to do this thing later in the day. I'm done with this place. And it was just so unsettling.
Yeah. Very characteristic of someone who's already made the decision to take their life.
Right.
A lot of people report that like their last day was honky-dory. They were happy.
Just a normal day. Nobody suspects. I like that they made that moment real to how that would be for someone who has decided to take their own life. Like, they didn't try to play it up or make it overly dramatic or overly suspenseful. And even the moment when she leaves Dylan, she looks at him almost like she's hoping he'll look up and see what she's about to do and catch her. It looked like one of those things of like, are you going to notice me? No? All right, here I go. Which, again, I think is another thing I've heard sometimes with, you know, people who are having suicidal ideations and struggling with that, is like they're hoping maybe someone will notice before they actually, you know, like, it just, there were so many layers to that I was just like, again, little subtle things, not in your face stuff, just like, okay. It's like she clearly has made the decision. It's going to happen, but she's just kind of like lingering a little longer because she could have just been out. Like, she could have just grabbed it and been like, clearly he's not paying attention. All right, Dylan, I'm done for the day. Bye. And just gone. But she kind of hangs over the wall a little bit. And then she's like, okay, I'll see you tomorrow. And that's it. Going back to Mark and his wellness session, that dang candle, first of all, when I saw that appear, I was just like,
there it is.
Oh, Belle, like, you devious, dastardly lady.
Right, we were waiting for it to pop back up. We were like, this doesn't match the decor of her office.
Right? Where is that going to go? Christmas candle. Now, here's my question to you. Do you think that had the candle not been there as like a subconscious thing, that the tree would have happened?
I don't know. Maybe it was a test, because at this point we know Cobell has the theory that PD was reintegrated. She's waiting on confirmation. She's waiting for the chip to be tested. Clearly knows how Mark's wife died. She knows this is his wife's candle. And I thought, is she testing for the possibility of some beginnings of reintegration?
Right.
Or maybe the tree is a surprise, because her reaction is not, it's subtle, but it's a little bit of surprise, I think, a little bit of shock. So maybe the candle was a test in of itself to see if he would even notice it or flinch about it or mention it. And she did not even anticipate that the tree was going to happen. Or any other thing was going to be revealing with the clay. I don't know, but the tree does bring me those questions like, is it something that indicates reintegration has started? Is it possible for reintegration to happen without whatever procedure that PD has had, because we know someone helped him integrate? Or are there always other subconscious remnants throughout, and it's not really worrisome because they have no explanation for it? So like, Mark has made this tree. He doesn't know why.
Yeah.
He will never know why. There's no way he could figure it out on his own. So maybe it doesn't really matter that I'm not sure which way it goes.
Last thing, and then we can wrap it up. How did those elevator doors stay open the entire time Helly was doing everything? Like, when they summon the elevator, does it just stay until you push? Because she couldn't have done that if she was in the position she was in. Because as soon as she got up there, the doors just closed. And it wasn't like she was standing in the way of the doors when she was setting all that stuff up. That was just a technical question. I was just like, did she have a way to hold the doors that like kept it up there? Because how did those doors not close and send her butt down sooner?
I think it was just an aesthetic loophole, right? It was like, it looked more, it was more, it raises the stakes of it happening for the doors to be open the whole time she's setting up her noose. rather than for
Mm-hmm.
it to be closed. That said, it would have been just as nerve-wracking for the doors to close while she was doing it, because then she's racing the clock of it going down and passing the
Getting
threshold,
downstairs. Mm-hmm.
right? Because if it passes the
Mm-hmm.
threshold before she's done, then her outie wakes up and is like, what the fuck? Why do I have this stuff?
Right.
So I don't know. Yeah, not sure.
It visually works, movie magic, but just from a practical standpoint, I was like, how them doors stay open? Like any other time, the doors are open, people get on, doors automatically close, like as soon as you get inside the elevator. So
Right.
unless there's like a hold button, but I would just think that anytime someone holds an elevator, in normal life, it makes a noise
There's
or,
an alert somewhere. Yeah.
right. So you wouldn't want to alert people to what you're doing.
Yeah, we know. It's not like she then like kicked a closed door button when she was up there.
That's what I'm saying. Like once she got up there, it's not like she like stretched her toe out to be like, down, please, or whatever. So I would think that the key card just summons the elevator up and it automatically just goes back down once you're in it.
Right.
Anyway, that was just a little technical faux pas that I was like,
Something's not working here.
I mean, I'll suspend my disbelief because this is a great scene, but
But now that I'm rewatching it for like the third or fourth time, I have questions about it.
I have questions. Oh, goodness.
Wow.
Well, you guys, this is episode 4 of the UUR.
Yeah.
This was a ride.
Thank you for sitting through it with us.
This was a journey.
But we definitely want to know your feedback on this one because it's a media episode.
Yes.
So, rate, review, contact us. Let us know your thoughts. If you have anything you agree with, disagree with, any thoughts to add, we want to know them.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for rocking with us. Like you said, Kali, we'd love for you guys to keep in touch with us. We'll be covering the 5th episode on our next podcast. And this has been the UUR. And remember, your job needs you, not the other way around. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the UUR with me, Callie Thomas, and my co-host, Rodnesha Green. If you've got questions for us, want to talk theories, share memes, or just connect, follow us at the UUR Pod on Blue Sky and Threads. Or you can email us at theuurpod@gmail.com. We can't wait to see the UUR. Bye!